Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, fallout from the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. After 20 years of war in the country, the U.S. loses its grip in a matter of days. What went wrong in an effort to withdraw the military without stranding Afghan civilians and allies? We talked to a former acting Secretary of Defense, a decorated four-star general, veterans of the Afghan War, and one former U.S. interpreter still trapped in Kabul. This week's episode is a look at how the final days of the Afghanistan conflict unraveled so quickly and what comes next. With the latest news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, this is Defense News Weekly, and this week we're talking Afghanistan. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Daniel Woolfolk. The events in Afghanistan took a dramatic turn as the U.S. neared its deadline to withdraw troops from the country. That's after nearly 2 decades of conflict. With the final U.S. troops on the verge of heading home, the Taliban swept across the country, shocking military and government leaders with the speed of their advance. The United States spent nearly 2 decades fostering Afghan forces who ultimately gave up to the Taliban with little to no resistance. The government itself collapsed nearly overnight. Questions remain about what to do next. Chief among them, how to safely evacuate the thousands of Afghans who worked with the U.S. waiting for visas and who are now in danger of harm by the Taliban. We spoke to a number of veterans and experts on the recent events and their effect on the military and defense community. First up, Christopher Miller is former acting Secretary of Defense who oversaw the Pentagon in the final year of the Trump administration. He spoke to Military Times senior managing editor Howard Altman about the recent events.
Chris, as a combat veteran who served in Afghanistan when the first troops in, you fought there, you trained the Afghans. What was it like to watch the fall of Afghanistan and the unfolding chaos in Kabul?
Heartbreaking. I spent last Friday, weeping all day long because I was just so heartbroken, and then I just kind of got angry after that because I think I was going through the process of mourning. And now with what's going on, it seems like the United States military has finally established some capabilities there, but it seems so preventable, and it was just as a military person that understands military operations and planning and how we do these things, it really bothered me a great deal.
What went wrong?
I mean, I heard the president speak, and you have to give him respect as he's the president of the United States, and we all want this to turn out as well as it can. But you just can't help but think, as a former military person, as former Secretary of Defense, I was in acting capacity, obviously, but you can't help but wonder what was going on that we mishandled this so dramatically.
Do you think that negotiating with the Taliban was ultimately a mistake?
No, that's how these wars end. You have to negotiate with your opponent, and that insurgencies and counterinsurgencies, this is kind of par for the course. This is standard. There was no ability to defeat the Taliban on the battlefield. There was the ability. We decided not to do what was necessary to do that, which I, as an American, agreed with, by the way. I mean, this idea that like we couldn't have won. No, we can win, but at the end, is it worth the trampling of American values and ethics and norms? Our United States military can win any war. Let's be perfectly clear. But we also have our value-based democracy where there's some things that we're not going to do, and I totally agree with that.
What would it have taken to win the war in Afghanistan?
2002. Decided to make it a special operations theater and just kept it small footprint and not expand the war the way we did.
When you were part of the decision-making system, were you confident that a May withdrawal under the plans that you were familiar with would have worked, and why?
The negotiation process wasn't over with the agreement between the United States and the Taliban. There was a follow-on phase, which was going to be to establish an interim coalition government, and then to let the Afghans use their traditional structure of the Loya Jirga to, ratify the next government and the next stage of their development as a country. So I don't know, because that never happened. So going, and also the idea was we'd maintain a small counterterrorism footprint there as well, and I don't know. So it wasn't executed, so I can't say. Or maybe it was, I don't know.
Would the plans that you were talking about, would they have been a complete withdrawal, giving up Bagram, for instance, or would have Bagram been maintained as a U.S. base?
I don't know.
In the plans that you were dealing with back then?
At that point, we weren't into the details. There was General Miller and Central Command, General McKenzie had numerous courses of action for how to retrograde. So I did not go into the precise details of that. And giving up Bagram, I mean, those were always the questions, is it Kandahar, is it Bagram? But we weren't at a point where we could go into those details yet, because we still had some other things that we needed to do that.
Should President Biden have blamed his predecessor, President Trump, for what is taking place now in Afghanistan, particularly in Kabul?
Straight politics, don't want to get involved, don't care, it's not helpful to America. Here's what I'm concerned about. Like, if you're a young buck sergeant or you're a young second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and you're watching your leadership kind of play these politics, I mean, what is that the message that our leadership should be sending? These kids are desperate for authenticity. They're desperate for just truth. And when they see the involvement of the military in these political affairs, it must be very confusing for them, and that's what concerns me the most about what's going on right now.
Do you accept any responsibility for any of this? And if so, what is that?
Gladly, eagerly accept all responsibility for every Department of Defense decision that was made up till 12:01 on the 20th of January, 2021. I'll stand by those decisions. I career Special Forces, Special Operator, and am extremely critical of my performance. That's the beauty of Special Operators. They always do their after-action review and try to improve their performance, and obviously there are things I always want to improve, but I will take full responsibility for every decision that was made there in the Department of Defense.
Is there anything you do differently, looking back with 2020 hindsight? Is there any of the decisions in Afghanistan?
Probably should have been more vocal in guaranteeing that the incoming administration recognized the challenges they were going to face, but I also was quite aware that they are part of the foreign policy intelligentsia and elite, and I thought they would understand what was going on. I probably should have been more forceful in guaranteeing. I don't know if it would have done any good. I did not want to further politicize a horribly complex and difficult situation for the incoming team. So that's probably, I'll accept full responsibility for that.
What would you have said?
I wasn't asked, so it doesn't make any difference. I mean, it would have, I think it would have been nice to be able to sit and go through the top 5 issues that were coming up and have a conversation about that. But that wasn't the way it worked, and so be it.
Earlier you said that your objective was to see this war end responsibly. We all saw the tumult and chaos in Kabul. Is this war being ended responsibly?
Time will tell. It certainly didn't get off to a good start. I thought there were other ways we could have brought this end state into being without the chaos and the crisis that we have seen in the last couple days. I also understand fundamentally the challenges challenges in the nature of war: fog, friction, chaos. But we do have a military that's extremely well trained, extremely experienced, that is designed to wring out as much of the unknown as they can. We have an intelligence community that we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on. There's been a fundamental failure that we need to look at and see how this happened and what we're going to do to prevent it from happening again.
And at this point, you're not prepared to say what that failure was?
I think it's just too politicized right now with all the finger pointing. I hope to assist our nation as we go through this reckoning and our after-action review and to develop our lessons learned about how we can avoid something like this in the future.
Retired Army General Barry McCaffrey has a storied military career and formerly led U.S. Southern Command. He followed the recent events in Afghanistan closely. McCaffrey spoke to Military Times Pentagon Bureau Chief Megan Myers about the final days of the U.S. presence in the embattled country.
All right, General McCaffrey, thanks so much for joining us. I'm just going to jump right into questions. The first one, and the one I think that's on a lot of people's minds, is as someone who has commanded troops in the past, what is your reaction to the situation in Afghanistan right now and the way that that country has deteriorated so quickly over this past week?
Yeah, well, it's shocking. It's hard to understand. It's a tragedy for the Afghan people. It's going to be extremely damaging to U.S. international credibility in the coming years. And the optics of it are damaging to our armed forces because the scenes of chaos will be laid at the feet of the U.S. Armed Forces. So it's a very troublesome situation. We're going to have to work our way through it, and I'm sure we will.
So right now, another one of the big questions is, how could the Afghan government, the Afghan armed forces have fallen the way that they did? But of course, we have a long history of, Special Inspector General reports out of Afghanistan saying that things were not progressing very quickly there, and contrasted with some senior leaders telling Congress, telling reporters that we had turned a corner. We were making great progress. How do we sort of, deconflict those two things? And in the future, how do we ensure that the public face of an effort like this doesn't belie what's really going on?
Well, things to look in the rearview mirror are certainly easier to understand. Personally, I don't think anybody with an IQ over 80 didn't understand that the Afghan government, the Afghan security forces, were in the hands of a leadership that was corrupt and incompetent. I mean, we all knew that. We had 20,000 Afghan commandos fighting with extraordinary courage right up till the end. But this wasn't a military failure of the Afghan security forces over the last month or so. It was a failure of political will. The Taliban negotiated their way in. It wasn't just Ghani, the president. It wasn't the head of their Afghan armed forces. Local police commanders and army commanders said, we're not going to fight for this outfit. We're going to give them our weapons and hope for the best. Or they were infiltrated already. So let's be clear-eyed about what's going on. This wasn't a defeat of the Afghan security forces. It was a collapse of political will.
Well, General McCaffrey, thanks so much for joining us. Do you have any other closing thoughts about the situation as we head into the second week?
No, say some prayer for our troops on the ground. They're such terrific fighters. Just joking with my wife, civilians would never understand this. The unhappiest people right now in the United States are the other two brigades of the 82nd that aren't in the ground. So they'll do their job, and I think this will come out pretty well. If the Taliban attacked that outpost of American military power, we'd have only one option: to escalate massively, and we do it. So I'm sure the Air Force and Naval Air Power is preparing a surge if they've got to go after the perimeter to get us out of there. But hopefully this will work out okay.
Great. Thanks again for your time.
Good to be with you.
When we come back, more coverage of the events in Afghanistan. And later, a conversation with an interpreter stuck under Taliban rule, fearing for his and his family's life. As the Taliban took over much of Afghanistan in a series of rapid advances in August, one community has watched the headlines particularly closely: veterans who fought in the country over the last 2 decades. Capitol Hill Bureau Chief Leo Shane spoke to Jeremy Butler, CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, about how veterans around the country are reacting to the news.
Jeremy, thanks for joining us, especially with all the news about Afghanistan out there right now. What are you hearing from veterans, especially veterans who served in Afghanistan before, just about the emotions and the frustration right now?
It's an unbelievable thing that we're hearing. I would say if there's one overriding message that we're hearing, it's that we have to get our allies out of the country and to safety. Not surprisingly, there's anger, there's sadness, there's confusion, all of this around what has happened in the country. But I think the overwhelming sentiment is that there is still time for the U.S. to take action and get these allies out. And we have to take advantage of this small window that we have. We failed to take advantage of the months and the weeks that we had leading up to this date to do so. And so I think the veteran community really does seem to be rallying around the fact that if we want to make the best of what seems to be turning out to be a very dire situation, we need to get our allies out immediately.
You know, a lot of Americans don't understand the connection between some of those Afghan allies, those translators, those folks who worked alongside, and the American troops. Can you talk just a little bit about what that bond is, especially, you know, when there's the distance, when folks come back and they've served over there? I know a lot of times there's still communication, there's still emails. Just how much of a connection is there with these folks?
Absolutely. It can't be understated, the connection between what are often referred to as interpreters. That's just one sort of category of service that so many of the Afghans brought to the Americans and other allies. But I think it exemplifies probably this entirety of the conversation that we're having here. So these interpreters were an absolute lifeline. Not surprisingly, very few of our service members speak Pashto, speak any of the local indigenous languages in Afghanistan. So these interpreters, one, they were absolutely vital to everything that our service members did, but two, they were putting not only their own lives, but the lives of their families on the line to support America and the efforts that we were making in their countries. They did this, one, because they were absolutely dedicated to a better future for Afghanistan, but two, they were also on the receiving end of a promise from the U.S. government that if they did these services for us, they would have the opportunity to receive a special immigrant visa, basically a visa to come to the United States with their family so that they not only would be rewarded, but they could escape from any potential retribution from the Taliban or anyone like that. So this was a promise, though, that was not only delivered by the government, it was literally delivered by many of the service members that were over there working with these individuals. So you're talking about Afghans that were putting their lives on the line, were saving the lives of U.S. service members, and then were also being told by these service members, hey, what you're doing right now, this is going to change your life. It's going to change the life of your family. We will make sure you get out of here. And so to now be back in the country and see what's happening for so many U.S. veterans, it's not only just personally devastating to them to see these allies of theirs lives at risk, but to realize that they were in effect lying to them when they told them that the U.S. would get them out.
So you said the focus right now is really on getting those folks out and helping them. Are you already looking past that at some of the emotional effects of this, some of the trauma that gets raised, and frankly, the September 11th anniversary coming up? I don't know what IAVA is doing in preparation, how much you expect this to just hit folks all of a sudden that this is over, and probably not in the way that many had hoped.
Exactly. So it's really, I think, kind of a perfect storm of emotions that are not only starting now, but are probably going to culminate around September 11th. So it's the 20th anniversary. It was, you know, the technical date of the withdrawal. We obviously realize we're in front of that. So maybe even worse than that, though, we're seeing the repercussions of what comes from our withdrawal. So absolutely concerned about the U.S. veterans and how this is going to affect them emotionally, physically, and for the long term. So we won, you know, the really thing that we're focusing on right now is not only getting those allies out, but making sure that we're taking care of the U.S. veterans, that they are getting the care and the support that they need. This has obviously been something we focused on for a long time, but I think people need to really understand how much of a psychological toll watching this day in, day out on the news right now is having on especially the Afghan veterans.
Well, troops may be out sometime soon, but it seems like we'll be talking about this for a while. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time on this.
Thank you, Leo. Appreciate it.
When we come back, it's this week's Money Minute. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives her latest tips.
Congrats, you're going to college. That's an amazing accomplishment. It means you're ready for higher learning and more responsibility. If you have a federal or private student loan to help pay for college, it's important to have a solid repayment plan. Yes, while you're in school. Opting for a repayment plan while you're in school helps you build credit, and setting up automatic payments guarantees you'll pay on time every month. Not to mention, it could get you an interest rate discount too, so ask your lender. If you're working and going to school, you'll need to know what you earn, what you owe, and when bills are due. Basically, you need a budget. That way, you can account for your student loan payment. If you see your payment isn't manageable, reach out to your servicer. They may have solutions to help manage your loan payment. And many offer super low payment options to make it easier on you. Executing this repayment strategy can help shorten the time it takes to pay off your student loan, reduce your overall costs, and boost your credit, which you'll need after grad. So head to college this year with your passion for learning and your plan for financial success.
Some of the most dramatic images coming out of Afghanistan have been at the Kabul airport, where thousands of Afghans fled to the runway in an attempt to get on any flight out of the country before the Taliban retaliates against those who work for US and NATO forces. Some of the most vulnerable are former interpreters who work with the US military and fear the Taliban will execute them if they're not evacuated. Military Times senior managing editor Howard Altman spoke to one interpreter still trapped in Kabul who spoke about the danger of getting left behind. He requested to remain anonymous for fear of exposing himself to further threat.
Describe the situation in Kabul right now.
Right now, it's with Taliban, with the white turban, with their long hair and with long beard. And everywhere the Taliban stopped their Ranger vehicles with the AK-47, with the rockets. Right now, our life is in a risk in Afghanistan. So I'm afraid. I don't know what's going on in future. And my future is, very difficult. The UK and also the United States, they didn't try to even, I don't receive any call from them that I go from Afghanistan. Right now, I hide myself at home. So the situation is not good. Everywhere you can see the Taliban with white flag, with long beard. I'm sure the future will be not good for me and for my children to live here because there's no education for my child, and there is no any social media. Even as we see the TV, all the TV they stop music, nothing, just there is an Islamic program, and also there is just the news, only the news.
Is the Taliban letting people through to the airport?
Yeah. At the moment, the Taliban want to stop people to go inside the airport. They didn't stop anybody. But the security doors now belong to Americans. If the Taliban will not stop anybody to at the moment to don't go inside the airport. They don't want, because the security is not belong to Taliban at the moment. So they won't say anything to the people.
But so the Taliban's letting people through to the airport right now.
Yeah, the Taliban will let the people to go inside. But if America let the people and check there, so the Taliban want to stop people to go inside the airport because the security is not belong to the Taliban. If the Taliban get the security of the airport, I'm sure they won't let people to get inside the airport.
What's your message to the President of the United States and to the Pentagon?
I applied for HIV like 20 days ago. Even I didn't receive my case number because people said it will take like 45 days to take the case number. But unfortunately, the Taliban came very soon because one of American senators said it will take like 3 months when the Taliban will arrive to Kabul. But it didn't take 1 week. And within 1 week, they came to Kabul and, and all the people, they lose their hope. Even I lose my hope at the moment. I am not sure if I can come to America or some people help me to come to America.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about your situation in Kabul and the U.S. leaving and you fearing of what's going to happen next?
Right now, I'm afraid, really afraid because I don't know. I'm afraid if, they kill me or I don't know about my 3 children, which they are, my elder daughter is like 6 years old and the other 2 is 4 and 5 years old. So I don't know what's going for their future. You know, I'm afraid too much. So just I want justice. If someone help us and rescue us from this bad situation.
That's a difficult story to hear, and unfortunately, it's one of many. And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.